Hi, so I would like to describe the rules for my Velocity game. So this game is really here as a pedagogical device. I really want you to learn, and deep in your heart, I want you to learn how things really move. And how things really move is they just keep on going in a straight line unless you push them in some way. So that this game, the entire idea about this game is you're allowed to control your velocity, but you're not allowed to control your position directly. I've set this up in 3 phases. I've got some sub-phases as well, but the first phase is just going to be sort of your Newton's first law phase. You move in a straight line unless something changes your velocity, unless you change your velocity. We're going to use 2 spaces, right? So every space here is going to reflect 2 spaces on this board. We're going to move 2 spaces per velocity space. This is your velocity grid. This tells us what your velocity is at any point. This tells us what your position is. We want to do 2 spaces mainly so that when you change your velocity, that change in your velocity is happening over your entire turn. All right. So that means that when you change your velocity, you're going to move 1 space in the same direction that you change it. So that's just to simulate the fact that this was happening over that entire turn. And then, of course, if you hit something, and in this case we just care about the squares, later on we might do something where you hit the other objects, the other players. But right now we just want to talk about if you hit the planet or one of these pillars, you stop, basically. You go to the last place you were and you stopped. Okay, so that's mainly what the game is going to do. Little velocity grid down on the lower left, that's what you control. On the upper right, that's the results of the things that you've done. All right, so let's start with one first turn. Okay, so let's see. Your first turn, start with your velocity phase. You're starting out with your token at 0 because you're at the very beginning. You haven't got any velocity right now. You're just sitting in one space. Now you're allowed to determine what you do. Let's say you just decide to move forward. In this case, forward will be up. So you move your counter 1 space up. All right, so that's your accelerating straight up. And because you've moved your counter straight up on the velocity grid, you mirror that same movement up here. You've moved your counter 1 space on the velocity grid. You move it 1 space on the position grid, on the actual map. And then, oops, wrong button. And then you check and see if you hit anything, and you didn't hit anything. There's nothing to hit yet. Your opponent does something similar. All right? So then you go to the next turn. You start with your velocity phase. You move 2 spaces for every space on this grid. So you started here at the little spot where I've got the blue dot, and you move 2 spaces up. Makes sense? All right. You can then decide to change your velocity, start turning possibly, or so I decide to start turning left. I can move my grid 1 space to any one of those 4 things. It's hard to see here, but just imagine you can only fire one of those thrusters. You can only fuel one of those thrusters at any time. And you move 1 space. There's your new spot. So now you've moved 1 space on your velocity grid. You mimic that change again. 1 space on your position grid. And that's how far you've moved, right? And now the little dashed arrow here, that says you haven't hit anything. It doesn't go through any gray spaces. You're okay. Then your opponent, he decides to speed up, right? So rather than just start turning right now, he's decided he's going to speed up a little bit. So he goes 2 spaces and then 1 space for having sped up. Okay? Your turn again. You start by going 2 spaces up and 2 to the left, because your blue marker is right here. Then you do your acceleration phase. In this case, you maybe want to try to keep on hugging in there with your turn. So you move it down 1, and you move your ship down 1, and you still haven't hit anything, so you're good. Your opponent starts to turn at this point. Okay? And now it's your turn again. You start by moving two spaces to the left, just like your velocity grid says. 1 space on the velocity grid, 2 spaces on the main grid, on the main map. Then you change your velocity. You're going to hit the planet, so you don't want to do that. So probably the best idea is to move up here. So you change your velocity up this way. Move it 1 space up, and that moves you up, and that simulated basically going from here to here. You've been firing the thruster all the way up, right? You've been firing it up all the way over here to fix this. So that's what the simulation is for. The little dashed line says you haven't hit anything. You're good. You haven't hit anything until the end of your phase. End of your turn, excuse me. Next, it's the opponent's turn again, and he keeps turning and gets way over here. It's looking bad for him. And it's your turn again. Go 2 spaces by 2 spaces. There you go, up there in that corner. That's where you are for now. Now you have to do something with this velocity, and you push it down again, which means that you push your little robot guy down here just a little bit more, and you still haven't hit anything at all. Everything's pretty good, right? We're doing all right. And now your opponent goes off the map, so we're going to more or less ignore him from now on. So now you go to your next turn. You move 2 spaces to the left because that's where your velocity marker says to go. Then you change your velocity. In this case, I just don't change my velocity. Just go at the same speed in the same direction. That means I don't do anything with my robot on this thing. I haven't changed my velocity marker, which means I don't do anything in the change position part of the acceleration phase. So the change position subphase of the acceleration phase, you only do something if you do something to the velocity marker. Then collision phase, you haven't hit anything. Your turn again, because the other guy went off the map and we don't care about that. When you're actually playing, remember I have extra little map pieces so that if you go off the map you can keep playing, but I just don't want to keep keeping track of the little orange dude. Okay, so we go 2 spaces to the left, and then you probably want to try to get in between these pillars when you're going around. So you say, okay, I'm going to move my marker down 1 space, which means I move my robot down 1 space, and I haven't hit anything yet. Next turn, move 2 spaces down and to the left, just like the little guy says here, and then I decide, okay, I'm going to accelerate a little bit more down, just like that, which means I moved my guy down a little bit, and I haven't hit anything in that phase. All right. Then 1 more turn, just to go through this. 1 more turn. So I go 4 spaces down and 2 to the left, because that's what my marker says. 1, 2, 1. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. It looks like that I'm going to have a problem going through this space here. So I try to move that marker 1 space to the left, which means I move the guy to the left, and this straight line between here and here still hits that square, that gray square. Since I still hit that gray square, basically what happens, I have to stop at this spot right next to the square that I would have gone through and set v equal to 0. We're not blowing up your ships or blowing up your robots or anything like that in this game. So that's how it works. Excuse me. Nobody ever calls me except when I'm actually trying to record. So that's how it works. You set it v equals 0, and now you're free to start accelerating so you can go around through the little posts and all the way around again. All right? Thank you very much. Bye now.